kind of an important thing.
Not going to make that mistake more than once.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to double check on LinkedIn just to make sure. Like I said, usually it takes a couple 30 seconds or a minute.
Process.
We got some buffer time here. All right, we are live and excited to talk about this topic. Specifically, it's something we get all the time, right? When it comes to creating and producing animation style videos, whether that's motion graphics, 3D videos. We're going to talk through a lot of best practices today. And I've got some, in my opinion, not only internal experts, but some industry experts here too. So for today's session, what we're going to be doing is going through about 13 different questions, and we're going to unpack really like a lot of frequently asked questions that I've been getting for many years. Kelly and Alyssa has also been getting for many years. So what we ended up doing is just aggregating a lot of these questions. And then we're going to run through these specifically. And we're going to have some fun with this too, no doubt about it, right? Before we get into it though, what I wanted to do is just do some quick intros. We won't take too much time with this. And then once we get the introductions done, we can definitely get into the FAQ style format that we're going to do here. So it's going to be from a format perspective, Alyssa's going to go first. She's going to run through a lot of her questions. Then I'm going to jump in there in the middle. And then Kelly's going to bring us home here at the end. So just to get us started here, my name is Jason Fair. I'm the VP of Digital Strategy here at DigividBio. Also an HCP marketer. I've had the honor to work with a lot of life science, healthcare, med tech, medical device, aesthetic, diagnostic companies when it comes to video strategies just like this that we're going to share today. And then also digital tactics to educate and influence niche HCPs online. So that's kind of my intro. If you want to jump in there, either Alyssa or Kelly, and then we can kind of go from there.
Alyssa, go ahead and
yeah. Hi, everybody. So my name is Alyssa Baker. I am a senior video producer with DigividBio. So my job is to help HCP marketers with their video content strategies. I help them develop a plan for how they're going to utilize video content to approach their target audiences. I have worked in video content production for over a decade now, and I've partnered with both live action video experts and animation experts, both in 2D and 3D animation for the entirety of my career. So I'm really excited to talk more about animation today.
And Alyssa is being modest. So Alyssa has, we call Alyssa our superpower. She has really done an amazing thing, finding great partners to work with, technology, and anytime we have a question about animation, we go directly to Alyssa. So we love having her part of our team and our superpower, especially when it comes to animation. I'm Kelly Howard. I'm one of the partners. I have a tremendous amount of experience in the life science, biotech, med device trenches. I've been working in this area on the marketing side for at least 20 years and a lot of experience with a lot of companies that are looking to focus on healthcare professionals and do a lot of work on the content strategy side, as well as also the digital advertising side. So excited to share some of our secrets.
Yeah, I think combined experience, what is that, like over 100 years? No, I'm just kidding. So I think, yeah, in dog years. Yeah, no, I think we're at like maybe 30 years or something like that, which is great. So that's the goal here, is to provide industry experts, walking through these, because this is kind of a daily occurrence that we get a lot of these questions. Before we get into these questions, if you have there's like 13 different questions that we're going to run through today in the session. If you've got burning questions that maybe we missed, feel free to drop it in the comments, the chat, and we'll definitely get to it if we have time. More than likely, this will take about 40 minutes or so, something like that. So we'll definitely be timing this. But if we missed one of your burning questions, feel free to drop that in the chat or the comment section. But before I get into the questions, or we get into the questions here, I wanted to run through some some great stats. And when I first started in digital and video, specifically for healthcare, it's been about 10 years ago. So one of the big things was really educating our customers, our clients to like start like looking at video as a tactic, right? 10 years ago, bandwidth was just coming up. People were just starting to look at video. Now it's kind of like a staple in your marketing and your content creation to create these types of videos. But these stats are still tried and true. So I wanted to run through some of these. Some of these may blow your mind. Some of these you may be like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. But video does have some superpowers. People process video 60,000 times faster than actually reading text. And that's one of the superpowers for the topic we're talking about today when it comes to motion graphic and animation and 3D style videos. The other great thing about video, people actually process video much faster than reading text, 4 times faster than actually reading text. And then after watching a product or explainer video, prospects or customers are 85% more likely not only to buy, but in this case, when we're talking about HCPs, to really start understanding your product, your solution, your data. And that's the goal for video, is to get them up to speed much faster. And then retention's really high, obviously, when it comes to video. So 95% of the messaging when watched in a video, people retain 95% compared to only 10% text. Now, my normal media consumption, I binge a lot of videos just because I like to get up to speed much faster. Most people do that same thing. Now, there's definitely some people that are on that, I'd rather read it to go through it. But I think as a marketer, our goal is really to get that person, to hack that HCP's attention and then get them in our funnel, right? Whatever client we're working with. So again, that's kind of that superpower when it comes to video. So we've got one rule today. All right. I know this is a competitive group, but we've got one rule here. So each person can answer a question after the first person. So again, Alyssa's going to be up here first. We're going to run through her, I think 3 or 4 questions. After each one, Kelly, you and I can jump in there, expand upon, or we could just skip to the next one. So let's get into it without further ado. Let's get this party started. All right, Alyssa. So we're starting from high level here. So I think that's the other thing to mention in these questions, fairly high level, and then we'll kind of drill down to more specific questions when it comes to animation, 3D, and motion graphic style video. So, hey, Alyssa, why don't you walk us through the different types of 2D animation videos?
Right. So I can summarize them a little more specifically, but when I think of 2D animation, the things that immediately come to mind are iconography, which is essentially images and objects that move around to illustrate a theme or ideas. And then kinetic text, which is when you utilize text to create a sense of emotion, right? So text moving in a certain way or pattern that feels almost human or has characteristics to it that are more animated like a character. And then 2D character animation, which is what a lot of people are familiar with. And there are 9 or more popular styles of character animation. We generally specialize in flat design animation, which is what you'll see most commonly for explainer videos online.
Perfect. And then I just put some visuals up here. Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was just going to say, the one thing that I've noticed throughout working with a lot of video and animation is that people confuse and call motion graphics all animation, which is indeed not the correct verbiage or the right description.
So I would generally say that it's kind of one of those not all animations are motion graphics, but motion graphics are animations. So motion graphics, to me, it typically is referring to elements that animate and move, but exist as a part of a live action video. So things like your lower thirds that give the name of your subject, or, your title cards, or things like that may move and have motion and are built in the computer, but not necessarily that tell a story, versus an animation would be where you're using that style of movement and using graphic assets that are built in a computer to tell a story. And I shouldn't say built in a computer, because technically you can hand draw or do stop motion. Those are still animations. Yeah.
It's very analog, but you can't do
it. Yeah, it's a little analog.
A little slow.
It's hard to do those things in a timely and affordable fashion, but you can do that. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, let's keep it moving here. So Alyssa, how long does it normally take to create one of these 2D animation style videos?
Right. So anyone you ask this question who works in video is going to kind of give you the runaround, right? Like they're going to tell you, oh, it just depends, right? Because there's a lot of variables that contribute to timeline. The average that we see among explainer 2D animations, which is the most common format for HCP marketing, is I'd say an average of 12 weeks is normal. So it could be less, it could be more. It really depends on a few factors. I think that if you're doing character animation, you can anticipate that building all of these original character designs and going back and forth with you, the marketer, to determine if they are indicative of your brand and your audience, that creative process takes more time. Versus when some people come to us with ready-made elements, right? Some people come to me and they already have brand designed iconography that they use regularly in their print materials. And so they might provide those assets and then we just modify them slightly or add to them. And that can make that timeline shrink down really quickly. So,
yeah. And I think just the nature of healthcare, whether it's life science, medical device, diagnostics, right? There's medical legal review, right? MLR review, which adds a layer of complexity to this. Also, you got to figure internal people, leadership people. So to your point about, how many people are reviewing this, right? And I think most clients that we work with, we're typically waiting for them to get back to us, right? And it's just standard because they have so many internal stakeholders. They have medical legal review. Now, if we were in an easier like B2C segment or industry, like things would move much faster, right? Because I get this all the time. I'll have someone, or we're strategizing for them and, hey, we've got to launch in 6 weeks. What can we do in 6 weeks? And you're like, well, you should have reached out 6 weeks previous to this, right? Like we should be talking about this, right, 12 weeks ahead of time. But I think, and that's why we're doing this, because a lot of people just don't know these things. And so when they go to planning, they're like, oh, okay, well, and not necessarily videos gets the last like hurrah, but sometimes videos kind of like, oh yeah, like they have the epiphany, like, hey, we need to do that product video or that hype video or sizzle video with animation, and they're a little bit late to the game, right? So I think, the big takeaway here is just think 12 weeks, but maybe even longer, depending on what you're doing. So as like an example, so that's 3 months, right? And so let's say if you're planning a launch in January, like right now, like you are January, February, like, either this month or next month, you should start to plan for this. Or if you're trying to get like an asset ready by the end of the year, for prime time in the first week of January, for example, like you should start cranking on it like right now. Right. Yeah. And we'll get into like what our process is as far as scripting and visuals and those sorts of things. But, 12 weeks is definitely a good guideline.
Sure. And I also think a factor that most new clients don't think about, like if they haven't worked with us as a partner before, is whenever you're setting up a new partner, there's a lot more strategy at the front end of a new relationship, right? And, going through contract approvals and all of that. So if someone came to me and I'd never worked with them before and they had 6 weeks to turn around an animation, I'd say, I'm not sure it's possible. But if someone I'd worked with a bunch came to me and they said, can you get me something in 6 weeks? I'd say, yeah, I bet I can. I think kinetic typography is certainly a very time efficient option that can still convey like a sense of excitement if you're launching a product or something like that. So there's still options.
Yeah. No, there's definitely some creative workarounds. Maybe you wanted it scripted, but now you can't because you've got to get that MLR reviewed, right? Everybody's got to get their hands into that script. So maybe you just do text on screen, right? And, obviously we've rushed projects before, right? Where our partners, had to pay a little bit more, but it was for a timely launch, right? They needed this as part of their asset. So, that's obviously definitely something that we can do from a rush perspective. Kelly, is there anything else you want to mention here on this question?
No, I think we've covered it. Animation, there's so many different types and styles. So, you're so much better off if you can work with somebody who understands and can provide those options for you, especially if you're working on a short timeline.
Absolutely. Perfect. All right. So let's get into the next one, Alyssa. So how many rounds, this is a great follow-up question. How many rounds of revisions does it normally take for a 2D motion graphic video, obviously?
So again, this is a case where there's averages. So what I've found in a survey of our past work is that the average is it's 2 rounds of revisions, and that's at each stage. So if we're helping you in the script writing process, there's 2 rounds of revisions there. If we're building the storyboards, that's 2 rounds there, and then it's another 2 rounds in the animation. The benefit of the method by which our team does storyboarding is that we generally build and design assets and include them in our storyboards versus a lot of artists will hand draw or hand sketch storyboards as a reference point, and then when they transition into the animation phase, then they'll build the digital assets, and there's a whole extra design review phase. We kind of negate that by building those design elements and popping them in the storyboard phase. So it does build a little efficiency into that timeline. But if you look at your storyboards and you don't love the particular design format, then it could take a little bit longer pumping out the next iteration, right? So it's typically 2 at each key phase of the project. But we've certainly seen more than that. And again, the only contributor to that is the amount of participating reviewers. Right. Anytime I've seen, and again, I surveyed this recently, anytime we see more than 2 sets of revisions, it's typically there are members of your team that came in out of nowhere and looked at the storyboard who weren't in the initial call, who had feedback. The more people who look at something, the more opinions are going to participate into that. And everyone has different creative perspectives. And with animation, it's very subjective.
Yeah. The other thing just to kind of mention here too is, and you kind of nailed it. Well, one, the storyboard, and later on during the session, I'll show you what a storyboard looks like and how some of our best practices for using a storyboard and the visuals and the script. But you kind of nailed it too. It's like when you do those rounds of revisions, like in the storyboard phase, it's so critical because we haven't started producing the video, right? So you get those 2 rounds of revisions, and then it's kind of like, hey, let's double check to make sure, because now we're going to get the actual production started, right? So if there's modifications, if you need another few days or another week just to make sure we're good to go, right? Because now it gets expensive if you want to get changes in the production phase.
Yeah.
Right?
The first round of revisions is a great opportunity for creative changes. Like, hey, we want to change the design of certain elements or change colors, or maybe the story isn't conveying this point we want to hit on with our audience, and we need to add an extra line of dialogue, which may create additional scenes in the video, right? Those types of changes should definitely be happening on that first round of review. And then on your second round is really, honestly, it's a QC. It's let's check and make sure that we've dotted our I's, crossed our T's, we didn't miss anything. So you'd hope by the time you're at the second round of review, notes are very minimalistic. Things like, we need to add a comma here. We need to, very minor things. Change the color of this character's hat. I don't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to see it. We have, many times in the process, until the client starts to see the actual storyboard is when it starts to click and it starts to make sense. And most people are very visual. You need to see it, which is why we do storyboards. But don't feel bad if you go into the storyboard and you go into this process and you just physically have to see something, which makes great sense. That's how most people operate and work.
We'll also do voiceover reviews. So if I've picked out talent for them, like obviously they select the talent that they want based on options that I provide, but they will review the audio content. But really, it's hard to gauge a voiceover performance until you see it all together. Once you see the animation with the voiceover and the music and all of the motion elements, it creates a totally different tone. So the real purpose in reviewing the audio by itself is honestly just to make sure our products pronounced correctly. Is our brand pronounced correctly? Like, are they saying these medical terms that maybe a voiceover artist wouldn't be familiar with, but that our clients very much are? Are those things being pronounced properly? And then cadence, again, the pace and the tone and things like that. Once you see the video put together, that's when you know whether or not that's working for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then one last thing, and then we'll get to the next question. But technology's gotten better too. When I first started doing this 10 years ago, just like you two both probably, where there was like a spreadsheet, right? And then we'd send the video and there'd be like, oh, at 2 seconds, we needed to change this, or this needs to flow better, right? So now technology is so much easier where you could see the video real time when it comes to post-production editing. Like you can say, you can click the timestamp and then put your, your notes in there. So I think that's helped with collaborating and consolidating that feedback too, versus a spreadsheet, right? I'm glad those days are long gone because everybody's got too many spreadsheets as it is, right? So, all right. So, hey, what if this happens, right? We rarely get this, right, Alyssa, Kelly? But let's just say, for example, like hypothetically, what if more rounds are needed after post-production actually starts?
Yeah, I mean, again, I evaluate these things on a case-by-case basis because if it's really minor notes, it's not impossible to make changes. Like, if there's a spelling error or something and nobody caught it right away, which happens. I've had clients who put their script through legal review and had 20 people look at their script and no one catch that this word was misspelled, right? And then it gets to us, and our animators are focused on the aesthetics of the artwork, not the accuracy of the copy that they were provided. They're assuming the accuracy of the copy, right? So they start putting it together, and then nobody notices that something's wrong like that. So those types of things we always make right no matter what. And we're pretty flexible. But I would say that if say, hey, I had a member of my team who'd been out for 2 weeks and they just got back and I really wanted their opinion on this. So I sent it to them, even though we're really late in the process. We're supposed to go into animation after this. And that team member, they didn't love it. They had a lot of creative opinions. They wanted to make some big changes to the characters or to the elements. Those things, when they happen, like the hard reality is making the choice to bring in more creative opinions at the end phase that can cost you money.
Right.
It really can. It's a risky game. So
Alyssa, I'm going to ask you what would be a good pro tip for people when they are, because one of the things that I've heard you say, and you can certainly state it again, which is setting expectations internally with your team, with the people who are going to be reviewing it, and let them understand and make sure you're getting review at one time, not sending it back to us. So maybe you can provide a little guidance, because that's a tough one.
I think what happens for marketers is, you're doing your regular job while also facilitating these video projects, and we know that this isn't your full-time gig. And so the pressure comes in to just keep something moving. And so you want the project to keep moving in the background, even if it doesn't have your active attention. And so you think, oh, I'm just going to send them my feedback really quickly so they can start making revisions and the project can keep in motion. And we lose track of whether or not we're the only participating decision maker in that. So to a marketer, I would say get buy-in early and get participation early, because it's important. If you know that you have even a CEO who's really involved and wants to be a part of the creative process and it makes them feel good to be a part of it, invite them to that kickoff meeting right at the beginning of the project, because getting everyone on the same page and making sure we're using the same verbiage around the project helps us move in the same direction. So definitely get as many participants you think are going to be involved in the review process as you can to participate in your initial kickoff, which we do every time. Before we start a project, we always sit down and we collaborate with our partners and we say, hey, what do we want to achieve out of this? Who are we talking to? What are the words that speak to them? Make sure that we're targeting our audience right, and that we understand the client's brand accurately, because we're a caveat to represent their brand when we're building these animations for them.
Yeah, great.
Perfect. All right. Last question for Alyssa, and then I think we transition over to me. What's best practices, or how do you select, and when you're collaborating with a client, when it comes to music and voiceover, how does that work into the process for an animation style video?
Right. I think that here's what I think people do and here's what I think they should do. I think a lot of people watch competitor videos and think, cool, I want to do something similar to that. So I'm going to go look for similar things. I don't think that's the most strategic method. I think that challenging your competitors by differentiating yourself in the market is always the best approach. So it's not that you can't look at inspiration in competitor work, but I'd be very careful not to tailor yourself too much to what your competitors are already doing. I would start coming up with key verbiage that you use to define your brand. So keywords, easy pop words that are, this is who we are, this is how we want to be represented in the market. And then that helps us set the stage for what tones are we looking for? What style are we looking for? With music especially, there's a lot of emotion associated with music. So using emotional keywords like how do we want to come across to our audience? What do we want them to feel when they watch our content? That helps us be strategic about how we select music. And then we provide options. With voiceover, there's a few really common formats. So there's instructional, which is more informative approach. There's what most people say they want, but don't want, which is a real person, which is casual speech. That's someone who has a cadence that's allowed to make mistakes or not as staccato, right? Versus which most professionals want something very clean cut. Narrative, which is a more storybook type of format, a spokesperson, which has a very sincere approach, announcers, which are hyper engaging and highly articulate. And then sometimes you want something custom. You might have like a character that represents your brand and you're trying to build a character persona around the narrative to your work. So those are the different formats you have to think about. These are the ways we can approach voiceover and how we tell this story to our audience. So, it helps to speak to them. So I would honestly think of your customer persona more than anything. Think about what they care about. Think about what they're going through emotionally that would lead them to need or be interested in your product, and use those to facilitate building those keywords so we have a foundation to search off of.
Yeah. No, that's great. And honestly, like music and voiceover, obviously the visuals are one thing, right? The text on screen, those sorts of things are great to help, again, get someone up to speed, but it's pretty critical to get the music and the voiceover right? Because when you're watching a video, most of the time, to your point, you want that emotional connection through the music. You also want to, again, it's almost like that person speaking to me through that voiceover, right? So you just want to make sure you don't want to get like caught up in that either, right? You don't want it to delay the project where it's like, oh my gosh, we can't figure out the right music, right? We can't figure it out that, my leadership wants this, we want this, right? Sometimes that becomes a challenge, but as long as you get that consolidated feedback, but it is critical, right? It definitely helps when it comes to you drawing that viewer in, when it comes to the voiceover and music. And we always do like casting calls, to Alyssa's point. We send out, if you're like, hey, what's the tonality, male, female? What are some other persona styles? And then, we get like submissions, like sometimes don't we get like 50 submissions sometimes, like Alyssa?
No, it's more than 50 for sure.
Yeah.
I go through a lot of talent to sift down to what I think's best for our clients. Like, obviously I trim out anything that doesn't meet quality standards, right? And then after we select from quality, then it's just a matter of what matches the tone that they're looking for. And then I send only, I'd say 5 to max 10 options. More options is not better ever for anyone, right? Like the more options you have to choose from, the harder it gets. So I try to trim it down as much as I can before I send it off to the marketer and their team to figure out what matches their brand, right?
Yep. Perfect. All right. Let's keep the party moving here. All right. So I'm in the hot seat now. Thanks, Alyssa. And obviously you can jump in and don't go anywhere, right? Because it's going to be me and then Kelly's going to bring it home. So this one, how do visuals get created for the video? So there's a couple different ways that you can do it. We're somewhat flexible when it comes to clients. When they have like a brand style guide that has icons or have a library of assets we can go into, usually we're pulling those because typically it's on their one sheets, it's in a brochure, right? It's on their website. So we want to have synergies when it comes to their brand and their formats. So a lot of times we are using their assets, Now, if you don't have that, that's fine. If you're still trying to create an impactful motion graphic 2D animation style video, our animators, motion graphic designers, they can also create things from scratch. So we definitely have gone down the road with people that don't have a brand style guide, where they're just like, hey, we're getting there with the brand style guide, but we've got the website, right? You can pull some things off the website to look at, to mimic, but we don't have all the images that you're going to need, right? So when it comes to like a 2-minute video, there's a lot of visuals that come up. So not every client, right, has every single visual. If you have those from a library perspective, then absolutely we can use that. And we already talked about storyboarding, so we can put those in the storyboards. But the other road, if you don't have that, would definitely be something where we can lean on our design team to create some of those. And sometimes what we're doing is modifying some stock images. Like we'll go online, we'll pull those stock images, but then we'll customize it, meaning like, hey, we'll put it to your brand colors, right? We'll make it more stylistically look like your website. So those are typically kind of the two different ways we're creating visuals for clients. Alyssa, Kelly, anything you want to piggyback off there?
Yeah. I think, so another thing too, like I had a client who said this once to me and I thought it was really great. When you put your content out online, you're not just competing with people in your market, you're competing with your audience's attention against all the major brands online. And so what I'd say to that when it comes to creative visuals is look at that stuff. Don't look outside of your specific market and just look at what type of content might my audience be watching out there from other key leading brands. And you can use those as reference points to jump off of. So we love having references. If our clients pick out maybe like 2 to 3 things they've seen that they really love the style of, or like a combination of things they felt would be a good fit for their brand, those references help us get in alignment faster and make sure when we are in that design phase that it goes more efficiently.
Absolutely. No, visuals are critical. Obviously, we talked audio and storyboarding, and also the scripts, right? And the voiceover, like those are all important too. But obviously, when it comes to the visuals, those are such a key to these types of videos. All right, this is I don't know how many times I've been asked this question, but it definitely comes up, right? To create a 3-minute video, how many words are in a script? And so, and then we've been on all those types of calls or emails that they've sent through, and they're like, hey, here's our 2-minute video, and it's like 500, 600 words, right? So the best practice here, and there's a little bit of a caveat because it kind of depends on the voiceover, meaning like what's the cadence, what's the tone, what's the speed of that professional voiceover reading the script. But if you can get the script around 150 words for every minute, you're going to be in that ballpark, right? So for a 3-minute video, you're going to be around 450 words, give or take a little bit, because it could be a little bit over, and I think that's fine, or it could be a little bit under, and I think that's fine too, because what we'll end up doing is when that script, and when we do the casting call for the voiceovers, what we typically do is we send them like the first or 2 sentences of the script. So at least you get context, like, hey, they're reading actually your script, right? It's not someone else's video, it's actually your script. So that's when we can really get a better idea of like, hey, yeah, we're within that 3 minutes, or 3 minutes and 15 seconds, or maybe we're under a little bit of 3 minutes. But that's the one caveat. It really just kind of depends on that professional voiceover, who you select, and their tone. A lot of the videos that we are creating are more like explainer style, more educational. So they tend to go a little bit slower from a pacing perspective, because, at the end of the day, for healthcare, like it's fairly complex when it comes to these solutions and people understanding an animation video. So it's definitely, when it comes to the tone and the speed of the video, they are a little bit slower, but that's fine, because at the end of the day, you want that person to retain that information. So again, 150 words for every minute of text for script.
And I think what trips a lot of people up when they have not written a lot of scripts is it's the visuals that are helping tell the story. You don't physically have to, describe everything going on. It's a matter of understanding that the visuals are going to help tell that story, and you don't have to do it with all text.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we always, and I think the next slide, I think I've got an actual, and I'm going to show, this is perfect context for just to show visually people the storyboard and the visuals. I think you nailed it there, Kelly. So on one side of the storyboard, this is our kind of traditional storyboard. You've got the script on one side and then the visual on the other. So it could be, to your point, Kelly, like, hey, what's visually showing on screen? But then also, there's a good option to put text on screen too. So if it's something that's maybe not in the voiceover, but it pops up, or if it's a key marketing message and you want it to pop up and it's also being read by that voiceover, that's another good context here. But traditionally, this is like the visuals that we get. Alyssa mentioned this earlier too, where we're kind of pre-building the assets during the storyboard phase. So that helps move this project along. So when we go into production, you get to actually see what the realistic like visuals actually look like versus like stick figures, right? So we're not going to get in there and do like hand drawings for anything. We're going to actually start building those assets. Again, if it's something where you're providing the visuals or we're building those from scratch, obviously we want to put those in this storyboard phase. And I know I kind of skipped ahead, but and anything else you guys want to add there when it comes to the storyboard, what it looks like, those sorts of things?
Well,
So-
I might do stick figures, but that's why I'm not doing storyboards, just so you know.
That's right. That's why you're not on the animation team. Yeah.
Animation. Yeah.
So on the storyboarding phase, because we do a lot of the graphic design in that segment of it, that is typically our average is 2 weeks. It's 8 to 10 business days for the first draft from the moment your script is done, just to put into perspective the timeline. And then revisions typically take about a week, just depending on the level of complexity, once we've gotten feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you think just from a timeline perspective, if you are marching towards a certain timeline, we always put these projects on a Gantt chart. But the other thing to think about is when you come to anybody you're working with from a partner perspective to create this video, or even internally, right? The script is like the crux of everything. I mean, the visuals definitely are part of it, but really it starts with that script. That's the first thing that we get into. So if you're starting to create like an explainer video or a product video or anything that you're using motion graphics or animation, definitely you want to get the script dialed in first as much as possible. We also help with transitions too. A lot of times clients will send us some of the scripts and it's maybe not like totally wordsmith. There's some not the greatest transitions, those sorts of things, but we can definitely work with clients on that from a timeline perspective.
We work with great copywriters who have experience in the healthcare industry too. So it's not as if we can't accommodate facilitating the scripts. I would honestly feel like a majority of the time our clients are providing us just bullet notes or even content about their product or service. So stuff you already have, I'm sure material your team sends out, that we then take that and use it to write scripts.
Yeah. Perfect. And then I know we talked a lot about motion graphic, animation, 2D. I want to unpack a little bit when it comes to 3-dimensional. We also do, as kind of a side note here, I don't think we want to get into it too much just based on time, but there's also a version of 2.5 D that you can look at too. And just as I'm thinking about this too, something else in the comment section, we also posted a link to our portfolio online. So as we've talked through a lot of this, when it comes to motion graphic style videos and 2D animation style videos, if you want to see some live videos, feel free to check those out on our website. There's a link in the comment section over there too. So specifically, these are the types of 3D style videos that we're creating and collaborating with clients on. Usually there's a reason for this, right? When it comes to 3-dimensional, if you need to rotate some sort of object, or in this case, if you're looking at the top left of the screen here on the examples, that's like an instrument, right? It's a device. So someone really wants to showcase and articulate what's this instrument size-wise, what it looks like, and they want to rotate it, right? So instead of just doing a flat image, this is a kind of like a 360 view, 3-dimensional view, obviously, where this rotates around. So a lot of cases when we work with clients, medical device, life science, genetic testing companies that have these sort of instruments, we're doing quite a bit of these 3-dimensionals if they want to showcase it as like a high-tech solution, right? 2D animation is a great workaround if budget's a concern, but if you're like really wanting to show how high-tech you are and really showcase this instrument, almost kind of like Apple-esque, right? Style wise. This is definitely three-dimensional. This is a great way to do it when it comes to instruments. And then if you have some sort of medical device or medical solution, and instead of showing a live operating room like in the OR, this is a great use case where it's a little bit softer visually to see. So if it is some sort of procedure that you're trying to showcase, we do a lot of these when it comes to three-dimensional. That's another really great way to do it. You can try to do this in a flat dimension, but it's just not as realistic, right? So if you have a solution you're trying to get a surgeon up to speed on, like they want to kind of see the intricacies a little bit more than just a flat two-dimensional. So in that situation, I would definitely recommend some sort of three-dimensional. Or if you have some sort of genomic or genetic molecule that you're trying to manipulate through the science of your technology, or if you're like in pharmaceutical and you have an MOA video, right? And you want to show that mechanism of action, that's another great way to show it. So you can see here up on the example, like this is an antigen for T cells. So they're seeing how they attract each other. And so when we're working with clients in oncology and diagnostic space, it's really good to showcase some of these and how the science of some of this genetic testing works. Those are a lot of the use cases for 3D. And obviously from a budget perspective, this is definitely on the higher dollar amount when it comes to executing these types of 3D. But in a lot of cases, it's merit to spend this kind of money, right? So again, if you're trying to be a little bit more, techie, a little bit more flashy about your instrument, you're wanting to show it off, or if it is a medical situation, or you're trying to show, molecules in action, right? Those are great applications for three-dimensional. Alyssa, Kelly, anything else you want to expand upon there?
I have a question for Alyssa. What has happened with the pricing for 3D animation? Because of technology, has it brought it down to something that's much more affordable than, say, it was, 5 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it is moving in a direction that it's become more affordable than it was historically. I would still say that I don't think we're going to hit a point where it's more affordable than flat two-dimensional. And the reason is just the process of creating the elements is more time intensive, especially when you want, like, the hardest part's photorealistic, right? If someone wants something to look like the realistic texture feeling of something, that's gotten a lot easier and more efficient in 3D software than it used to be. But it still takes time because even with the use of AI in these 3D programs, there's a lot of minor things that all AI hallucinates, right? Like there's a level to which it just doesn't fully understand the components that make something, an organic thing specifically, real and lifelike, and has to be tweaked slightly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Perfect. All right. Let's get into voiceovers, Kelly. Like, I think you're going to bring us home here. I think we've got about 3 or 4 questions. Is it best to have a voiceover? I know we've talked about it a lot. So, yeah. But is it best to have it? Well, walk us through the reasons why you want a voiceover. I guess that's the big question here.
I think we've discussed a lot of it, but at the end of the day, there really is no better way to really help tell that story. It helps add to the animation, and it completes the whole story and narrative with voiceover. You certainly wouldn't want to look at, unless it was a very different conceptual animated video. Voiceover just really helps tell the story and completes it.
Yeah, and I would just say the other thing is most social platforms, or if you're on someone's website, you've got the audio off, right? And so what happens a lot of times, you want to make sure to have that voiceover in there just so people can see it too, for sure.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and,
cool.
And just to be clear, just so everybody knows here, I got all the softball questions, which I was very pleased with. I'm fine with the softball questions.
Yeah, here we'll lob another one up for you, okay? And I kind of teased it up here a little bit too, but should there be subtitles or like closed captions included?
Yeah, this is actually not a softball question. This is a really important bit of information for people to understand. So closed caption subtitles are very important for lots of reasons. One, when you typically when you're on a social media platform, they're almost always the audio is turned off. That is because we all know that many times people are watching at work or in areas where you don't want that audio blaring. So it's really, really important also for hearing impaired provides, increases access to your content. That's important. But probably out of all of these, I think the most important is that it increases your reach. Search engines utilize that closed captioning to help them rank. So if you have that closed captioning on there, you really need to have it. That way, the search engines can more easily rank your content by indexing the closed caption. And that's probably the most important out of all of these.
Agreed. And then who actually creates the actual script for the video? I know we talked about scripting at a high level a couple times, but kind of like walk us through, like, what are the options typically for who's creating those actual scripts for the video, Kelly?
Yeah, great question. So as a general rule, our team is usually creating these scripts. Our team has a lot of experience in writing for biomedical, life science, and so on. That's generally how that works. However, there is on occasion where a client maybe has an in-house writer, and maybe we'll take that role of maybe script support. So they might, on occasion, have somebody in-house that wants to write it, especially if it's very, very scientifically complex. We also can do a lot. We do a lot of scientific content as well, but sometimes clients feel comfortable, maybe more comfortable having somebody relay, and then we'll just provide more of a support, making sure that it's within the right time and is resonating with their target audience and so on.
Perfect.
Great question.
Yep. And then I think this is the last one. I'm just double checking. Yes. So I know we're at like 45, 46 minutes. So last one, bring us home, Kelly. When would you need to actually, and this is great, and I know we're not going to have a lot of time to unpack this, but when would you need to actually create, like, what's a good example of creating an animation style video?
Yeah, animation obviously is going to be really effective when you're trying to explain and simplify complex projects, especially when you're trying to visualize intricate biological processes. Some use cases would be things like when you're trying to illustrate gene editing or molecular pathways, or I think we talked about this earlier, the drug mechanism of action. Those types of visuals cannot be done with static images, or probably shouldn't be, or text. So animation is absolutely key in really helping simplify and explain abstract concepts. That makes it much more tangible and easier for people to grasp.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to piggyback off that for a moment, like, obviously we have a lot of clients in the, setting up clinical trials, showcasing data, right? Where you've seen the poster presentations, right? Those big poster boards that you're like, oh my gosh, there's just, information overload, right? And what I always typically recommend is, we can extract some of those visuals. We can put those in the actual video. Again, talk about the voiceover, those sorts of things. But when it's talking about like a complex poster, like, the animation style video does that heavy lifting for you, right? It's not going to explain everything on that poster presentation. The goal of that video is really just to get that researcher, scientist, right, medical person, whoever it may be, to be like, oh, okay, I want to learn more about that, right? You get that epiphany, you get that curiosity from them. It's almost like a movie trailer, right? Like, these are the most impactful things in this poster presentation. And then if they want to go down the rabbit hole, right, to learn more about that clinical trial or that data that the company's presenting, like, they can do that right through that poster presentation. But that, movie style trailer video about your data is a great way to do it. Obviously, you kind of mentioned it too for product launches, those sorts of things. Again, I think using sight, sound, motion, right? That's the power of this too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, one thing before we close, because we haven't touched upon it. I know we're at the end. Alyssa, can you speak to the use of live filmed and animation? Because that's another really great area. It doesn't have to be completely animated. So can you maybe talk to when that makes sense?
Oh, I love when people are strategic about utilizing animation in combination with their live action content. And actually, it plays in really well to what Jason was just talking about. So often, you might be giving presentations at events and you had to slap together your slides really quickly, and they're just your typical, really, honestly, like, dull slides. And so adding motion to those elements can help make the content more engaging when you're sending it out, or when you're taking snippets out of your presentations and your posters to utilize for social content to drive traffic. and then hopefully linking people back to the full media on your website, which brings traffic back to your website. There's a lot of ways to be strategic about how you utilize animation to enhance your content, both in the way that it can tell the story, but also be repurposed. The benefit of once those assets exist is you have those forever and you can use them anywhere. So yeah, I think there's great benefit if you're already doing live action video to consider amplifying it with animation. And I think something we didn't totally touch on is digital. If you work in a digital product space, you know, AI is exploding in this industry. So I think if you provide a product or service in a digital capacity, explaining those concepts and how they work and visualizing those concepts really helps your audience. And that works well both independently as animated content and also in combination with, you know, your SMEs talking through these concepts.
Got it.
Perfect. Yeah. No, that's great ending, because, you know, as you, you know, plan your next animation style video, we've obviously unpacked a lot during this session. So hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully it's been valuable. Again, as I mentioned in the comment section, the chat feature, there's going to be a link to our portfolio. Feel free to check that out. Or if you want specifically like, you know, 3-dimensional, I know we talked a little bit about it at a high level. We didn't show any visuals. If you're interested in looking at some examples, feel free to reach out to any of us on this session, and we'll definitely be able to do that, send that to you over so you can take a look at that. It's not on our website, so I just wanted to mention that here. I think that's it for now. Again, if any questions come up after this session, feel free to reach out to us. Bye for now.